Hi friends, I'm Anita and I'm back with another video. Today I want to share with you my December wrap up before I get into a phase and I don't really want to anymore. I knew I had to film it this weekend because otherwise it was probably never going to be done. Not that the books were bad or anything, just so you know. First of all, I'd like to say Happy New Year to you all. It is now the 3rd of January as I'm filming this, and yeah, I'm hoping you all had a good holiday season, and that you had a safe New Year's and stuff. Let's hope for better times in 2021. I mean, let's face it, 2021 is not going to get that much better than 2020. It's going to take a while before we get back to normal. So we'll see what 2021 leaves us. In December I managed to reach 12 books, and I only needed to read 2 books in order to read all of the books that I had on my TBR. But I did read a couple of books that wasn't on my TBR already. The first thing I finished was one I've been struggling with the majority of November to get through, so I only had a couple of stories left when I came to December, and just wanted to finish it, and that was Skeleton Crew by Stephen King. This is a short story collection of his, and I had very few stories in here that I really enjoyed, so for me it was a bit of a slog to get through, and I probably should have just DNF'd it. But you know, there were a few good stories in here, but not enough to give a very high rating. I ended up giving this 2 out of 5 stars, and because of the few stories that were good, the rest was just a waste of my time. I think that's what I said on my Goodreads review, and that is definitely true. The next book that I read was a reread, and that was Spiritbound by Richelle Mead. This is the 5th book in a Vampire Category series, and I really enjoyed my time rereading this. I didn't know how I would like it. I think as I was remembering back to it, I was having fond memories of this, but there are parts of it that I didn't like very much, but then there are other parts that I think is really interesting, and I think the setup to the final book is really excellent. There's a lot of things happening in this book that I thought happened in the 6th book, so I have definitely mixed some things up with what happened later, but I'm very much looking forward to reading the final book. I keep giving it the same rating as I did the first time around. I have a very nostalgic feelings towards this book as well, but I also just actually think it's a really fun, entertaining read. The next one I read was Night Watch by Pratchett. This is the 29th book in the Discworld, and it is following the City Watch. This one follows Sam Vimes as he's actually being sent back in time. He's part of the Ankh-Morpork City Watch and comes back in time to see some of the rougher patches of his own life, and it's very interesting. There's definitely a lot of things going on in this one that was really interesting. I really enjoyed my time with this one. This is one of my favorite. I don't know, I can't remember how many 5 stars I've given to Pratchett this year, but it wasn't very many. Not that any of the Pratchett books that I read are bad, but I've become a little bit more selective with when I put a 5-star sticker on the books. But this one was definitely really great, and I ended up giving it 5 out of 5 stars. It's one of my favorites by Pratchett this year for sure. So I highly recommend it. And I do think that you can read this without having read other books by him, but one of the things I really liked about it was how some of the discussions were very timely in terms of stuff. I can't really get into specifics much because I don't want to spoil anything, but I thought there was really an interesting thing that even though this was written back in the 90s, it had a lot of relevant topics that was happening today, and that was interesting, and I liked the perspective that Pratchett gave that. Next up, I read The Witch with No Name by Kim Harrison. This is the last and final book in the Hollow series. The Hollow series is 13 books long, so it's book 13. This was, I was really happy with how everything tied up in this book. And currently I'm a little sad that there's actually a continuation of the series, because I think that it ended up with in such a good way that I didn't want it to be spoiled by a continuation series. So I'm still not sure if I'm going to pick up the 14th book at some point. But so I say that it's a final, but it might be the final one for me. I'm not sure about that yet. If I do continue, I'll probably consider it as a spin-off and not a part of this specific series, but I'm not sure about that yet. And yeah, but I enjoyed this one. It wasn't as good as just the previous one, but it definitely tied things up very well and very nicely. And I was really into the story from the beginning to the end, as usual. I think there's always a lot of things happening in this series, so I ended up giving it a 4.5 stars. I treated myself to 2 Terry Pratchett books this month, so I also read The We Free Men by Terry Pratchett, which is the 30th book in the Discworld. I really enjoyed this one. This is the first book in the Tiffany Aching series, and the Tiffany Aching series, I still have a bookmark from the last part. I apparently haven't moved it, but I have listened to everything. Tiffany Aching is a young adult series in the Discworld, so, and this is the beginning of that. I think you can read. You can also read like the Amazing Maurice and His Educated Romance before going into it. Not that they have any ties or something like that, but it's the same vibe they give up. We follow Tiffany Aching, who is going in the search to find her another name. She's not really happy with Tiffany, so she goes on a hunt to find out a good name for a witch. And yeah, it's a really interesting journey. Also, she has some sort of talks. You see sort of present tense and past tense. Sometimes you're in something that happened previously with Tiffany Aching's grandmother. And but then also she meets up with the other witches from the Witches series, like Esme Weatherwax, which was very interesting. And yeah, I really enjoyed this. I think it's a good start to the young adult series. I think it's so well written, and I had a lot of laugh out loud moments in this one, as usual. And I ended up giving it a 4.5 stars. It wasn't as high as Nightwatch for me, but I still really enjoyed it. Next up, I read Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. This is the first book in the Scholomance series. I have decided not to continue with the Scholomance, but this is a book that's set at a magical school or magical university, where they're taught monster hunting, alchemy, and stuff like that. Our main character is not very likable. She has recently been saved by this guy from her the same year, and she's really pissed about it, because now she needs to destroy him or kill him, because no one's supposed to save her. And yeah, overall there are parts of this I liked, because I think the writing was really good. It had a very atmospheric way of pulling me into the story. The plot itself was not very engaging, and that's why it doesn't get a high rating. And yeah, there were things that it lacked a lot. So I ended up giving it a 3 out of 5 stars. But I'm not going to continue with the series, because I don't think the characters didn't leave an impact on me, in me wanting to continue on with this series. So yeah, it's a pretty book, but not one that I necessarily recommend as a good book. But if you think it sounds interesting, then definitely, by all means, you can pick it up. The next thing that I finished was Dead Ever After by Charlaine Harris, the 13th and final book in the Sookie Stackhouse series. Sookie Stackhouse series is following Sookie, who is able to hearing all humans' minds. She's not able to hear supernatural kind, so she has a tendency to seek out the supernatural world just in order to be around people that's a little bit quieter in her mental part, in the mental state of hers. But the problem is that the supernatural world is not always a good thing to be in for a human. She doesn't have a lot of powers, so she is a little bit weak. But she turns out she's good at befriending these other supernatural people. And yeah, I don't know what else to say. The ending left a lot to be desired. So I think it was weird, and there's a lot of things that wasn't explained. Not that I need a full explanation of an ending, but there are definitely things that didn't add up. And I don't know. There are definitely things I didn't like about it. So I ended up giving it, what have I written down? I gave it 3 stars. So it wasn't all bad, but it just didn't completely, yeah. There were things that could have been done better, but then there were other things that really enjoyed about the last book that happened in the last book, some revelations that was interesting. So yeah, overall 3 stars. Then I read a contemporary romance. I read The Foxe and the Hound by R.S. Gray. This is following a girl named Madeline who is living in this small town. She is a real estate agent, really struggling to put sales in, so she doesn't get a very good payment. I think she gets a bonus every time she does this sale or something. Otherwise she has a very limited amount of payment every month. I'm not sure of this, but that's what the gist I get. I don't know why the job situation was like that, but it might be normal in the US, I'm not sure. What also happens is that she has just recently gotten a dog, a puppy, and the puppy is a breed that grows exceptionally fast. So it's already pretty big, considering it's only like, she's only had it for a couple of weeks, and she has a hard time controlling it. It's the first time she's owned a dog, but the alternative was that the dog was going to be put down, and it was a healthy dog. It was just that no one wanted it. So she got it from the shelter and took it in, and then accidentally loses, the dog runs away, runs into another man who turns out to be the vet, and he becomes really angry with her. But then as time goes on, they become friends, and more than that, and it's a really funny, quirky, romantic, contemporary romance. That was what I wanted to say. And it explores some good friendships between her and her she has a couple of friends, and also I think that's something that really was enjoyable to read. It was a good balance of the romance part, but also she had a good friendship by herself and some of the things that happened. And I was happy that it wasn't dealing too much with like the miscommunication trope, which I think happens way too often in contemporary romances. However, I end up giving it this, I end up really enjoying this and highly recommend it, and I'm definitely going to be reading more from R.S. Gray in the future. I will be checking towards that every once in a while. It's never really on sale, but it's also never expensive, so it would be easy to get it when I feel like in the mood to read another one of hers. And I ended up giving this book 5 out of 5 stars. The next thing that I finished was Murder on St. Nicholas Avenue by Victoria Thompson. This is book, I think 18 or 19 of the Gaslight Mystery series. This follows, it's set in the 1800s, late 1800s, and this one doesn't follow Sarah and Frank Malloy. It follows some other characters, side characters in the series, and I'm not gonna say who because I don't know how spoilery that will be, but I think it's really interesting seeing a mystery solved by someone else in this series, and they do it really well, and there's a good balance and good communication between the characters, and I really enjoyed it. It's funny banter, and it's also Christmas time, but it's not very Christmassy for a cozy mystery. There's not a lot of talk about the Christmas season, I think, but I ended up definitely enjoying it. I gave it 4.5 stars. I thought it was really fun to see it from a different perspective, and that definitely added something to it. Next up, I read On the Way to the Wedding by Julia Quinn. This is the last and final book in the Bridgerton series. It's book 8, and the 8th book follows Gregory, who is the youngest of the sons. He's not the youngest in the Bridgerton house, but the youngest son. And he has his eyes set out for this woman called Hermione. Hermione is one that he saw across the room. He just saw the neck of her kind of thing and fell in love with her in that moment. Like it was, yeah. And so he finds out that Lucy, I think she was Lucinda is best friends with Hermione, and Hermione decides that she would help Gregory getting to know Hermione, because she's very set on making sure that she finds a great match. But Hermione herself is in the faith that she's in love with someone because she's seen the back of their head kind of thing. But then obviously as things progresses, the feelings change, they become fond of each other, but she is promised to someone else. So all of this is sort of the talk about how they find each other, and how they end up changing their lives sort of change, and how their feelings change over the book. It's really it was a lot of fun, and I definitely enjoyed it. Not all of the Bridgerton's books are great, but I think the last two here have been actually really good, and I end up giving this book 4 out of 5 stars. I think it was a really good solid end to the series. Next up, I finished another reread, and I reread Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. I'm not gonna talk too much about it because I don't really have to. I'm just gonna mention that I did reread it, and it was interesting rereading it because it's been so long. I've only read through it once, so it's my first reread of the book, and I had a lot of things that I'd definitely forgotten about that are not part of the movie, and that I'd forgotten happened in this book. But it was interesting, and I definitely think that it sets up the rest of the series really well. The next thing I finished on the same day was Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse. This is an audio that I started by the end of November, but I didn't finish because then I had to start on my December TBR. And then I finished it after finishing the audios that I could for my December TBR. The only audio I didn't read was Timeless, but that's only because I couldn't get it from the library. So that was a hold on it. So it's fine. What I have to say is I really enjoyed this. Black Sun was amazing. It was different than a lot of things. It had high stakes, and it started out with quite an opening, and it just kept the pace all the way through it, and there was a lot of political intrigue. There were different we followed different clans. It was indigenous people that they followed, and they all had their own sort of beliefs. That was really interesting. And there were some gods and stuff, and we followed multiple perspectives. I really enjoyed it. It was so a fun ride, and I'm really looking forward to reading on in this series. I definitely like this more than her urban fantasy series that I read. What was that? I've forgotten the title of that, but I definitely enjoyed this one, and I ended up giving it a 4.5 stars. I highly recommend it, and really happy I read it. And the last and final thing that I finished in December was Midnight in Death by J.D. Robb. This is a novella in the In Death series. It is the 7.5. It happens right after Holiday in Death. Holiday in Death is set around Christmas and follows a killer Santa, just so you know. And this one is set starts more or less right after they've solved the murder in the 7th book, and then goes on to try and solve the murder of someone who committed by someone who Eve has actually convicted before he has escaped from prison. And so yeah, I don't think I really enjoyed this one so much. What I like about the In Death books is that alongside the mystery, they have a lot of character development, a lot of things going on, and I don't think they can have a lot of character development in these novellas because there's not a lot of time to show it. And I knew there was not really high stakes because you can't have a major thing happen in the novella of a series and just mention in the main books that, oh, this person died in the novella kind of thing, and previously that would not work really well with a series. need something like that will need to happen in a main book. So I don't know what I expected of it, but it wasn't really enough for me. The mystery wasn't great, wasn't the best, so I ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars. I still enjoyed elements, and I still think it's really interesting being in this world. This is a series that's set in the future. It's set in, I think, 2050 or something like that. I've forgotten. I think they mentioned the year. I think the series started out in 2045 or something like that. So it might be a couple of years later, and there's just a lot of the way that they are solving the mystery. They use some technology that seems, this could definitely be what it's like in 50 years time, or by this point 30 years time. When this was written, it was 50 years in the future, and I think that's really interesting how she made that. And yeah, so part of the reason I give it a 3, not a 2, is because of those things that really make sense and stays true to the other parts of the series. But yeah, 3 stars for this. But overall, I'm super happy with my reading of in December. Let me know in the comments down below if you read a lot of good books in December, if you finished up some goals, if you just relaxed or didn't read very much or was too stressed about things. Also let me know about that. Yeah, I'm hoping that 2021's reading will be better than this year. Not that this year has been terrible, because I've definitely read a lot of good books, but I just would like to see that my reading gets a little bit more consistent, and that I personally gets back to be a little bit more consistent with my content on my YouTube channel. That will be a big goal for me. I don't know if I'm actually going to do a goals video this year. I'll have to think about it. I know a lot of people do it, and I know I usually do it, but I'm also worried about setting some goals and this year, because I definitely don't want to put too big goals for myself. But yeah, anyway, I'm rambling. Let's save this topic for later. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you in my next video very soon. Goodbye.